Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ben here. I am back again today doing another video, and the subject of today's video is going to be on Zach Lavine, specifically trade scenarios for Zach Lavine. Yes, the Bulls, I guess you'd call him their star player, is requesting a trade, and today I have come up with 5 different trade scenarios for Zach Lavine. The first of which, I'm just going to get right into them. I'm not going to pause at all. I'm just going to go straight for it. The first is basically a Joel Embiid for Zach Lavine trade. So, why would Philadelphia do this? Well, it seems like if they don't do well in the playoffs this year, there's a high probability that either Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid will be traded. Signs indicate that Embiid has been relatively unhappy in Philadelphia since Jimmy Butler got traded, and that the franchise as a whole would probably be more likely to trade him than Ben Simmons. To me, Zach Lavine would be a good fit in Philadelphia in place of Joel Embiid. Along with that, you get Thomas Satoransky and a first round pick from the Bulls for this season. I think Embiid is clearly better than Lavine, and these other pieces would be good compensatory pieces to complete the trade. A pretty high Bulls pick from this year, and then Thomas Satoransky, who I think makes sense because if you got Embiid out of there, I feel like you can play Ben Simmons at the power forward and Al Horford at the center, and that leaves a hole at point guard, which is where I think you could line up Thomas Satoransky if you don't want to play Shake Milton there full time. Or you can play Shake Milton, but basically your starting lineup would probably look like Horford, Ben Simmons, Tobias Harris, then probably either Lavine and Josh Richardson, or Lavine and Satoransky, or Lavine and Shake Milton, with any of the other two guys coming off the bench, which I think would space out the lineup a lot better, basically trading Lavine's 3-point shooting for Embiid's, which is a lot better, and then getting a nice backup point guard or starting point guard in Satoransky and a first round pick in the Bulls first rounder, which would be uh, a nice additional little piece there to get a good supporting player. And for the Bulls, they get a guy who you could argue is the best center in the league. So to me, pretty fair compensation. Next, and you could ignore the failed here on the trade machine. This is just because they're not accounting for something that I'm thinking of with this trade. But next, I'm thinking of a trade between the Nets and the Bulls for Lavine. So Spencer Dinwiddie is actually going to be a free agent, and I expect him to sign a contract for bigger than $10 million. So I expect him to be around I'd say between $17 to $20 million range. So his contract would actually be more expensive. So the money would actually work in this scenario. So that's why you can ignore the failed on the trade machine, because Dinwiddie would actually be making more money in this scenario. And I think him and Levert and a Philadelphia first rounder, which the Nets have, would be pretty even compensation for Lavine, because in my opinion, Dinwiddie and Levert are both really promising players who are still relatively young. I think Dinwiddie's like 26 and Levert maybe is like 24. So still relatively young. You don't have to like blow up the young core of Chicago by getting these guys. Also, a first round pick is a nice compensation too to add on, because by themselves, I don't know if these guys are worth it, but I think together with the first rounder, this is pretty even right here. The Nets get that kind of third significant piece that they can put around Kyrie and Durant, and he's probably going to come cheaper than a Bradley Beal, but probably give you a lot of the same production as a Bradley Beal. But I think he'd be cheaper, because I think if you want to go after a Bradley Beal, you'd have to give them the package that I'm showing here, along with probably Jarrett Allen too, which I don't think for Zach Lavine the Nets would have to also give him up. The third trade I have here is Lavine going back to the Timberwolves for probably what I would think is the weakest package out of any I put together, but hey, Chicago might be willing to take it, based on what's available to them. I have Lavine going to the Wolves for James Johnson, who's really just a throw in for salary cap matching. Two really young wings who still have some potential in them between Josh Okogie and Jarrett Culver. And then a first round pick from Minnesota, which will be really high in this upcoming draft. I believe, it's guaranteed to be like top 5, I think, but could be as high as like number 1 potentially. We don't know. So hey, that could be a really solid pick for the Bulls, and along with that, you get two really young guys to still help contribute to building. Okogie's like 21 or 22, I think. I think 21 actually, or maybe even 20. And Jarrett Culver's like 21 or 22. So you got some really nice young pieces. You know, they're not going to be the stars of your team, I don't think, but they can be solid starters. And then a really high first round pick. And so, you know, if Levine's disgruntled, this could be an option for the Bulls if they don't get many good returns out there. Next, I have Lavine to Toronto because I think that Toronto really needs like a really solid like first option, and I think they kind of lack that right now. Like Pascal Siakam's kind of become the default first option, but I think Lavine would kind of be a good 1B to Siakam's 1A. And I think a pretty fair package would be Norman Powell and OG Anunoby. I believe OG's still only 21 years old, so relatively young, and still's got a good amount of value, and I think still has a lot of room to grow as a player. Norman Powell is a really solid shooting guard. He averaged 16 points a game this year, and I don't think he is as good as Lavine, but I think he can bring 70% of what Lavine provides to a team, and would probably not be as much of a leader as Lavine was on the Bulls. But I mean, how much leading was Lavine really doing when he was leading them to these back-to-back like 20 plus win seasons? I don't know. So I think both the guys on the left side of the screen are still relatively young and have a good amount of promise, and this kind of solidifies Toronto with a really good second option, and it solidifies the Bulls with some really nice young players who I think are a pretty decent fit for this team at the same time. And the last trade I came up with is maybe one of the weaker ones. I'm not really sure. Lavine is a really hard dude to pin down what his actual value is because this year, yes, he put up 25 points per game, but the Bulls are also terrible. So like I hate, a lot of people don't like the phrase empty stats, but I feel like Lavine might be putting up some empty stats this year. Like on a really good playoff team, I feel like he'd probably be averaging more like 16 to 17 points a game. So I can't really tell like is he really a 25 point per game scorer, or is it just because the Bulls have very few good offensive options and he's just one of the few that gets fed a ton of shots as a result? Anyways, I have them getting Eric Bledsoe, who still actually is relatively young. I think he's like 29. He feels like he's been in the league for 10 years, which he has been, and he's still only 29. Besides that, you got really nice young wing players in Connaughton and DiVincenzo who can be starters, I think, eventually for an NBA team and be really solid, like 15 point per game contributors. So, probably not the most flashy package, but I think the Bulls are getting relatively good value for a guy who I'm not exactly sold on necessarily, but I think that this is relatively even, and the Bucks get a really good third option too, because I think that they really lack a really solid third option. They probably you'd say they give up a lot of their wing depth here, but they get a solid starting lineup of probably something like probably after this trade, the starting lineup next year, if they bring back George Hill, it would be like George Hill, Zach Lavine, Chris Middleton, Giannis, and Brook Lopez. And although they're losing a lot of wing or guard depth here from Milwaukee, I think they already were so deep that even though they're giving up a lot of depth, they'll still be all right in the long run. So there you have it, guys. Those are 5 trade scenarios for Zach Lavine. These are pretty much just off the top of my head. I have a lot of fun with trade scenario videos, as you guys know. So hope you enjoyed this one. Hope you check out future videos, and hope you have a good day. I'll see you next time. Bye.